I've recently happened upon a manga called Destroy All Humans, They Can't Be Regenerated, and it's about Magic the Gathering. But interestingly enough, it's not about magic characters, it's not about Jace or Fleam or Urza, but about magic players. Specifically magic players in 1998 Japan. And another thing that caught my eye is how this manga uses the decks and the cards that these characters play to give us more information on who they are. Especially since these decks are a bit more grounded than what you would expect from, say, the Yu-Gi-Oh series. They are based on actual competitive decks from within that era. So you can expect stuff that's a bit subtler than the fish guy playing a deck full of fish creatures. So this video is going to be a discussion of the characters introduced in the first 3 volumes of the manga and how the decks and cards that they play are used as tools of their characterization. Now the first character that we meet is our protagonist, Hajime Kano, who we meet as he's triumphing over his schoolmates with his black suicide aggro deck. This is somewhat reminiscent of actual mono-black suicide brews from 1998, like this one from Daniel Brickwell at Worlds 1998 Seattle. And soon after his victory, Hajime himself lets us know his philosophy towards playing Magic the Gathering. In Chapter 0, the one-shot proof of concept that later got remade into Chapter 1, he says, "It's all about how fast you are, my friend." Whereas in the proper Chapter 1, he says, "My motto, speed is virtue." And that philosophy is reflected in Hajime's deck choice. It concentrates on playing small, evasive creatures like the Dothies with their shadow keyword, and also playing quite fast and loose with his own life points, with cards like Hatred or Carnophage. On an aesthetic level, a mono-black deck filled with zombies and horrors is not an obvious choice for a protagonist. And the reason that's given for that choice comes from Hajime himself as well. He wants a deck with cool, edgy cards because he's a teenager and a bit of a dork. And both of these demographics might enjoy that sort of thing. So the authorial intent here is not to present Hajime as someone who fits into Black's color philosophy within Magic, but rather just a person who would find these sort of cards cool. It paints him in a slightly endearing light as he attempts to appear cool and a bit edgy, just like his cards, in front of his peers, to the point of taking on the pseudonym Cloud, after Cloud from Magic the Gathering Universes Beyond presents Final Fantasy. It also seems believable for Hajime to be able to dominate on a kitchen table or, in his case, schoolyard level, but face certain dangers once he starts facing opponents more prepared for this sort of strategy. And as Hajime visits the local game store in the first volume and meets those more serious opponents, he quickly drops towards the bottom of the pack. He reveals a tendency to open himself up to getting blown out by sweepers or other reactive cards, and to overtax his own life points. Tendencies born at least partly out of a lack of game knowledge, which is further established as Hajime absolutely bombs in his first sealed event. So that's where Hajime Kano starts out from. The deck he plays accentuates both his innate potential and good intuition as a player, sets him up as a believable king of the playground, and gels well with his overall desire to appear cool. But it also works towards setting up the first hurdles in his path. And the first hurdle in that path appears when he makes his first visit to Shibuyama Cafe, the local game store where we meet our second duelist of note, Sawatari, Emi. She's initially introduced as the school council president and top-scoring academic, the one person Hajime can never surpass on that field, despite being quite academically gifted himself. And his visit to the Shibuyama game store also reveals that she's the champion MTG player over there, a fact that she hides from her schoolmates. She utilizes a white weenie strategy that allows her to put Imperial armor on an evasive creature as her premier game plan. The choice of white weenie makes sense in terms of her own color identity as a character. She's all about social hierarchies and order, or at least an appearance of order. together, both keeping order as the class president and having it thrust upon her, as her initial conflict is all about wanting to appear very prim and proper to her peers, which leads her to hide her passion for magic. So where Hajime was a character that would play black but not necessarily embody the color's philosophy, she is kind of the other way around. It also sets her up nicely as a foil to our protagonist by giving her access to certain anti-black color hosers like Light of Day, which serve as a concrete symbol of her initial dueling superiority. And as Hajime challenges her to a duel upon his first visit to Shibuyama, that dueling superiority becomes apparent very quickly. The duel takes a slightly different form in Chapter 0, the proof of concept one-shot, and in how it was remade for Chapter 1, and I actually slightly prefer the Chapter 1 version. One change that I really like is that in Volume 1, Hajime actually wins the first game of their best of 3 by being slightly faster with his deck. Only after seeing his strategy does Emi sideboard the anti-black silver bullets like Light of Day, which in Chapter 0 were simply a part of her deck. I like that change because it makes her deck make a bit more sense. Most players wouldn't mainboard a color hoser unless they were expecting to face black specifically, and it also portrays her as someone with a bit more game knowledge than Hajime. Effective sideboarding is the main contributing factor to her victory here. So she isn't better than him because she incidentally has the perfect card or because she chose the right color to play, but because she makes an actual decision that requires actual forethought. Initially, I was a bit unsure on what the identity of her deck was saying about her. It is arguably a bit slower than Hajime's, but it is still kind of a weenie strategy, similar to actual 1998 white weenie lists like the one Matt Linde won US Nationals with. Initially, her choice of this strategy doesn't really give us a lot of info on her character. It doesn't differentiate her from Hajime that much on this axis, so I wasn't super happy with it. But she later takes on a more reactive, controlling role, both in her matches against Hajime and other players. So that ends up being a good fit narratively. He's more of the aggro player, and she's more of a control one. Unfortunately, it does on occasion make her deck make less sense. One example is that for some reason in Hajime's rematch against her, she main decks Armageddon against a faster aggro deck without any real way to break parity on it. And she later moves further in that direction, but with a bit more forethought, adding cards like Cataclysm, which ends up working a bit better because her ability to put Imperial Armor on a flyer is usually going to give her the advantage when both players go down to just a couple permanents. This development leaves Sawatari Emi's deck in a decent place narratively, I feel. Both hers and Hajime's are kind of beatdown strategies initially, but they use colors on the opposite ends of the color pie, and she later transitions to playing more of a control strategy, just as she is a lot more controlled in her behavior. She is also far more restrained by her circumstances, dealing with crippling outside pressure to appear perfect and a controlling parental situation, while Hajime kind of does whatever he wants with reckless abandon, just as he disregards the life costs associated with playing his mono-black cards. She uses singular buffed-up creatures, the more chaotic Hajime tends to attack with multiple smaller ones. And these differences set up a nice parallel for them to slowly start moving towards an opposites attract style of romantic plot further on in the manga. I'm not going to spoil if that actually happens, but they do start moving towards it from like Chapter 2 onwards, I wanna say. So Hajime gets beaten by Sawatari twice, the two establish their rivalry more formally, as well as an undertone of fonder feelings between the two of them. A bit of time passes, and we get to meet another regular at the local gamester that both of these characters frequent. That being Akui Go, or Gobu-san. Now, his initial role in the story is less of a full character and more of a plot device. He exists to have a specific effect on Hajime, and that effect is due to Gobu presenting another style of counter to the protagonist's strategy. He plays Sly, a mono-red deck that features both aggressive creatures and a healthy dose of burn. and the instant speed nature of the second allows him to outplay Hajime whenever the latter overextends by lowering his life total too much. So his initial role in the story is just that. He presents a roadblock that calls for a specific kind of growth from the protagonist. He also has what the young folk would refer to as an aura moment, when he uses Fire Blast to extend his reach despite being tapped out, which I fondly remember also doing in Popper a couple of years ago, and this frame is exactly how it felt. Initial losses against Gobu-san and the looming specter of a large-scale tournament in Tokyo that the cast hopes to attend require Hajime to rethink his approach to the game. And the tournament at the DCI Center, and indeed a first-round rematch against Gobu-san, calls for Hajime to present us with a second deck. A blue-black two-color one this time. And this one is far less of an aggro strategy. In his rematch against Gobu, he actually utilizes the Dancing Gnomes combo, using Corpse Dance with Buyback to recur Dancing Gnomes, and he uses it to great effect. Now, since damage still used the stack back then, Hajime can use the gnomes to trade against Gobu's creatures and sacrifice them as well to gain life at the same time, which he uses to great effect against the slide deck, slowly running the opponent out of resources. And the deck also uses a combination of Buried Alive followed by Living Death for that big Exodia moment in which Hajime resurrects 4 creatures, I think. Now, it still has some thematic connection with his earlier deck, with Hatred still being the finisher, with the key pieces still being black in terms of their color identity, but it does showcase some growth from Hajime as a character. It is a result of his earlier losses against Gobu's Sly and the talking to he gets from Emi after bombing in the sealed event earlier. And that motivates him to explore strategies that are a bit more complex than his well-tested aggro, and also kind of just slow down a bit. His school friends suggest blue as a good second color, and the result is a deck that is a bit harder to pilot, but still fits Hajime as a character. Specifically, a slightly improved Volume 2 version of Hajime. Now, our protagonist comes off the heels of the match he wins against Gobu, straight into the introduction of another rival character, Subawara Yakumo. And we initially meet Subawara Yakumo a bit earlier, just before the tournament starts, and they appear to be a shy, slightly socially awkward person of unknown gender, sitting alone until Hajime reaches out to them, which is then juxtaposed with Yakumo being a fearsome duelist both figuratively and literally, capable of beating Sawatari off-screen and becoming Hajime's round 2 opponent. And Subawara Yakumo play a 5-color Nightmare Survival combo with a Living Death Plan B as well. And the manga concentrates heavily on the fact that the core enablers of the resurrection strategy in the 5-color deck are black, making Subawara a foil to Hajime on the grounds of also playing black as their primary color. Yakumo themselves spotlights this, calling black their favorite color, and noting that Hajime probably likes it as well. They even play the same card, Living Death, that allowed Hajime to emerge victorious from his match against Gobu moments before. This, plus the dominant performance in their match against Sawatari off-screen, immediately cement Subawara Yakumo as a fearsome rival character. After all, they did outperform the protagonist on both the field of playing black and the field of beating Sawatari. And in terms of their characterization when Hajime is not in the picture, the spiky nature of the deck and Yakumo's effective piloting of it is contrasted with their bashful demeanor and unassuming appearance, quickly setting up a character that's made up of 2 opposing forces. A timid person on one hand, but a dueling monster on the other. The tournament ends with Subawara and Sawatari placing in the top 8, with Hajime and the other store regulars not really seeing much success despite our protagonist showing some growth, and we are treated to another bit of a time skip, which brings with it the standard rotation of Mirage Block. Another symptom of these changes is that Hajime comes back to his Suicide Black aggro build, which I think is a bit of a backslide in terms of it being interesting, but there are reasons for it though. This is the part of the story where it transitions to more of an ensemble cast. Subawara starts appearing more often in a deuteragonist role. We see duels happen that Hajime is not even part of, like the one between Sawatari and the shop owner, who uses a green deck built around Oath of Druids and the Spike creature cycle, like Spike Feeder. This could be a potential reason for why Hajime is back to a thematically narrower strategy than the blue-black combo one. It's so other characters have space to form identities of their own. And also so his own character has a bit more specificity to him. He isn't fully back to square one in his presentation as a duelist though. Despite the deck's strategy being simple again, he's shown to be better at sideboarding, he is better at using cards like Duress to remove key pieces of his opponent's strategies, and he's also becoming a bit more effective at mind games, and nowhere is that more relevant than in his duel against the next character we will introduce and the last one in this video. That being Kurushima. He's a childhood friend of Hajime's who first visits the local gamester in disguise under the moniker One-Winged Angel like an absolute dork. Don't ask me why my handles in so many places are Sapphire, to learn about Hajime's strategy. Soon after, he reveals to the hero that he's also romantically interested in Sawatari, causing a rift between the two that they hope to resolve in a high-stakes Magic the Gathering game. The stakes of the duel is actually the slightly more problematic whoever loses has to give up Sawatari, but I would like to pretend that it's something else. Not long after, it's heavily implied that Kurushima only feigned having a crush to get Hajime to play him more seriously, and to potentially have the hero face his own feelings for Sawatari, which paints Kurushima in a kind of trickster mentor role. He expresses a hope to push Hajime to grow as a player and as a person by getting him out of his comfort zone by any means necessary. And both the any means necessary mentality and his kind of trickster mentor nature gel very well with him turning out to be a mono blue player, the first one on the ensemble by the way. Like in Hajime's case, this is more so an association with the type of player that would enjoy playing blue rather than him being an archetypical blue character embodying the philosophy of the color within Magic. The deck he plays is the infamous Academy combo from Combo Winter, otherwise known as Turbo Genius, an artifact strategy using Tolarian Academy to ultimately deck the opponent out with a huge stroke of genius. The choice of deck, presented in the manga as kind of try-hardy and scorned despite its popularity, combines well with the high-stakes nature of his and Hajime's match. In their first game, as Kurushima assembles the combo, Hajime can't really do anything, and that adds a great bit of dramatic tension to the match. The rest of their best of three showcases the growth that Kurushima expects to see from Hajime, and we, the readers, would like to see as well. Hajime is first able to sideboard in Megrim as an effective counter to Kurushima's Mind Over Matter, and in their final round he outmaneuvers the blue player in Mind Games territory by getting him to hyper-focus on the threat of Megrim and hitting him with a surprise swing for lethal using Hatred. So Kurushima's deck works well both as a tool of characterization, as it paints him as this kind of no-holds-barred trickster mentor style of rival, and as a plot device requiring a specific kind of growth from the protagonist in order to ultimately be overcome. The conclusion of that match marks the beginning of Volume 4, as our cast agrees to face each other again at Grand Prix Kyoto in January next year. It also marks the end of my recap of the manga. You'll have to read the rest on your own if that sparked your interest. I've been Simon from Games Deconstructed, thanks a lot for watching, and a special thank you to the patrons over on patreon.com/gamesdeconstructed, especially Dillinger, Ola Brynner, and Anna Schultz. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.